So today you're going to want to stay in for today's episode because we have Dr. Isaura Gonzalez. Please introduce yourself to our group and who you are, your experience. She comes with immense experience and a personal journey, and trust me, you're going to want to stay tuned. Welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for having me. Thank you for holding this space for everyone. I'm Dr. Isaura Gonzalez. Like Laura said, I'm a clinical psychologist by training and education. I always like to tell people my journey. I was conceived in Cuba, born in Spain, and proudly made in the USA. And that's really been my journey here that brought me to become a psychologist. My mom and my family left from Cuba with nothing but literally the clothes that they were wearing, and with the hope that we could get whatever education and become whomever we wanted to become. So empowerment really was always taught to me since early. That was the message that was given. Currently, I own two businesses that are a little bit newer and a little bit of a shift from what I normally do, but one of them is called Emmy Wellness, and the other one is Usia Psychological Solutions. And they have very deep meaning to me because Emmy means I am. So every time you say Emmy Wellness, you're saying I am wellness, and there's a reason for that. And Usia means true essence. So, which has really been in all the years of my practice, which has been over 25. That's really been what I've seen from people is getting people to their true essence. And it just happens to be, it's been through a psychological lens and more recently, more of a holistic perspective. So individuals can achieve what it is they're here to do.
So tell me, how did your personal journey, right? 25 years experience of being really a high achieving visionary, because also, which we didn't mention, to basically facing a stage 3 breast cancer diagnosis. And how did that transform your approach to wellness, especially for women?
That's great because as soon as you started the question, I was like, well, here's my leeway, right? Like how I made the transition. So about maybe 5 or 6 years ago at this point, I I had a lot of different shifts in my life. One of which was leaving my marital home with 4 children in tow for their safety. And in the process of trying to regain access, I realized it wasn't going to be as easy as it had been first presented. And so I was like, okay, I have space, I can breathe, I'm going to take care of myself. I had actually written a letter, and I don't think you and I had discussed this before, but the letter had been titled The Year of You, without realizing that everything I had written in the letter was going to unfold in the coming year. And so it started with making these doctor's appointments, having switched my insurance, and just feeling this peace about myself that I was taking care of myself. And then here we come, March of 2019. And I get what no one ever wants to hear, a phone call after a mammogram and a sonogram. I'm really sorry, Sauda, but you have to act urgently. You have lobular carcinoma and you have 3 massive tumors in your breast. And so I think I was just waiting for the confirmation because I had felt them once I had had the sonogram. And as you and I had spoken earlier, had I listened to my body was speaking to me, and I had ignored it. I had placed other things that was going on. I thought it was just my heart. I thought it was stress. I thought it was all these other things, but it wasn't. I had really something very dangerous going on with my body that was really absorbing my energy. It was absorbing my life. It was about to take my life if I didn't take other action. And so that night when I got the call from the doctor, um, I called him back Saturday morning. He gives me those words. I dropped my daughter off at, she was doing cookie sales for Girl Scouts. And so I drop her off. She could see I'm visibly upset because I'm on the phone with him. And she says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Everything's fine. Let's go sell some cookies. I'll be back." I was on my way to my office. And I cried on my way to my office. I called my brother. I was like, I really need support here. I'm like, if something happens to me, I need you to, I need to know someone's going to take care of the kids. And he said, "You're the strongest woman I've ever met." He said, "You'll be fine." And I went through the day. And so I want to talk to you about what happened that night. So I get home, I have to, or I chose to act like everything was okay with the kids, getting them in bed, right? Well, our routine has already been shifted because we're not home. And I go to bed and I start to sob. I wasn't crying, I was sobbing to the point that I'm pretty sure I passed out from hyperventilation. And the last thought that came into my mind was, I can't believe this is how my journey ends. And so about 3 in the morning, I get woken up by what I say is the Holy Spirit. Literally, I was lifted off of where I was sleeping. And I open my eyes, and the first thought that comes in is, your journey is not over today, your journey begins. And that was enough for me to realize that I had to make a shift, not only for myself personally, but I had to really dig in deep of what existence really meant.
That's powerful. So, what would you say, going through that whole journey, right? What are some of the biggest obstacles you feel like women face in general? Like, what did you face? And what are you seeing and how that paralyzed to what you see women face when trying to prioritize yourself? And what mindset or tools did you use or that you recommend others to using to overcome those barriers?
Well, that's a lot of questions, and so I'll happily answer all of them, right? And I think they kind
Well, I
of
guess
go,
it weaves, right? It
right? It
weaves. It's
weaves
like I call it the weaving. Weaving seems to be my
together.
favorite word lately.
Um, so so one of the things was really trusting my intuition. So that came first and foremost. The fact that I heard, like you and I are talking, a very clear voice, a very clear message, paused me because I had, even though now I can say, oh, yeah, I've had those before, I probably ignored them. I couldn't ignore it then because I needed support and I knew I wasn't going to get the support I needed from just my fellow humans because not everyone experiences a health crisis like that. And so that was the first thing I needed to do was lean into my intuition. And that's exactly what I did from that morning through today. Um, and anything and everything, whether it's business, whether it's communications, whether it's business relationships, whether it's friendships, business, anything and everything, my kids, I lean into that intuition. I listen to my body. I listen to my intuition. I call it listening to the whispers of the universe. It's always talking if we're willing to hear it, right? So that was the first thing. The second thing was using that in order to empower myself of what my goals really needed to be. I had to be very clear what my goal was. And my goal, I had two at one point. My goal was feet above ground and detox my body. So I'm smart enough to know that my body could heal itself if if I gave it the opportunity. And so that meant I had to shift everything I've ever known about eating, about self care, about anything. And I really was like a baby, I was a beginner. Um, and I followed everything that my body told me to follow, despite everyone else. So that's the second thing, right? Is we have to drown out the noise that isn't ours. You have to really hone in because there's going to be a lot of people telling you a lot of things that aren't yours to hear. And so that was the second thing I did, right? Is like, I'm going to tune everybody out. I'm listening. I'll acknowledge you. I'll validate what you're saying. I'll validate that you're concerned for me. However, only I can take care of myself. So that was number 3. There came a point in time where I realized no matter how much my mom tried to shave her head the day my hair fell, no matter how much like my sister-in-law went with me on my first few appointments, no matter how much my kids asked how I was doing, no matter how much my aunt offered, to take from her little stash in her drawer to buy me a wig, there was only one truth. And that one truth is that there was only one person that could take care of me, and that would be me. And so that ensued with what people don't realize how intense saving your life becomes. It was probably over a year's worth, and I was in treatment for one way or another every single day. And every 2 weeks, I could get, I think it was almost 36 hours of a break. So I had like one full day and then a little bit of the next morning, which is very intense.
So, Mike, so what's coming to mind for me as I'm listening, right, is some of the cultural conditioning that maybe we've had as women in this country. Can you talk about some of those barriers you may have experienced that women in general, also might experience?
Well, one of the things that I thought was brilliant, right, was how I am highly educated. It's my life, right? Like, I'm the one who's at stake here. Like, no one else was at stake here but me. And it was almost as if I wasn't smart enough to know what I was doing. It wasn't, it was as if, like, are you sure you want to do that? You've done this for, some was my family. You've eaten this way for 47 years. One more week isn't going to hurt you. It's not going to do anything to you, without really understanding this newfound, not, I don't even want to call it knowledge, because it was really kind of like downloaded to me, what I needed to do. And it's hard to explain to someone when you go through something so life altering, so life changing. While it wasn't the same as some people's near death experiences, I can tell you that the journey was so close to that edge all the time that it's very hard to not change and not understand what is wrong with things that are happening. How my word, even in the medical field, was not heard sometimes. I don't want to say respected, because I don't think it was to that extent, but it definitely wasn't heard. And so I had to really lean into everything I've taught ever. So this was really like almost like, okay, here we go. Let's see how good you can, walk the talk now, when it's really crucial for you to walk the talk and you're getting all this pushback from people telling you, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. This is what you should be doing. So for women, that's a lot of what we're told. We don't know enough. We aren't smart enough. We're not capable enough to take care of ourselves. And yet here I was, I really am a miracle. I've defied everything that people said um, could not be possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I have like so many thoughts going through my mind right now as far as everything when I think of like, again, October being Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And, you know, first of all, thinking of my friend, Catherine Kasanoff, who passed away a couple years ago with legal suicide in Switzerland, but it was because she was involved in a very brutal um, domestic violence custody in the state of New York. And I'm not going to go too much into her case because anybody can just Google her name and or
Yeah.
put the hashtag and find it out. But I mean, I met Catherine just through our own journeys many years ago, um, and so and to see like the cultural pressure too, right? Of like the system that was enabling abuse in her case, not only enabling it, but really trapping her in it, where it actually ignited a relapse in her breast cancer. And she was fighting for her life, fighting for safety, and fighting for her children all the same time while family court was basically enabling the abuse to continue. And finally, when it just became too much, at the end. And that was because, her husband spent $3 million with 3,000 motions over less than 3 years. How much can one person take? You know? And so it brings me to that point, but it also brings me to the idea of on the other end, the concept of always being told like the ideal woman is kind of like the Martha Stewart of perfection in a way. Whether it's not men that are told they have to self-correct their skin tones on their face. It's not, or that they've got a little bit of extra belly fat around the waist, or that their chest muscles are too big or too small. So and then on top of that, you're expected to hold a job, maintain a household, maintain your appearance, all simultaneously while smiling every single day, right? I mean, these are the things that women are experiencing, and we have to acknowledge it, especially in the current state that we are in the US right now, right? And it's how do we take a pause, take a step back, and figure out like what comes to mind is like discernment. Like discernment's been a year a word for the entire year. And if you've been following the podcast, you would have heard that discernment was kind of like the year, this was the word for the year. Throughout the whole year I've been saying that. But how do you discern, right? Because I've also heard people say, "Oh, I'm listening to my intuition," but what I'm hearing from them is not intuition that's speaking to them. It's their trauma pain that's speaking to them. So how do you discern what is the trauma voice and what's the intuition?
Well, it's interesting. I just want to go back to something you said about the court, right? It's also about accountability, which is something that I learned really quick.
Mhm.
And once you know, I hate to use the word play the game, but once you know the rules and the systems and all your players, it becomes a lot easier to get through something. But accountability is something that I found. A lot of times women, we're not given opportunities to make amends. We're not given opportunities to self correct. We're not given opportunities. However, in the court system, they offer opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And when you are in a
To
situation,
men, to men,
to
let's just
men,
say to men.
usually it's to
Men,
men.
yes.
Usually it's to men. It's supposed to be equal, but because we try to follow the rules as women, we don't need to be accountable because we often are accountable to ourselves. We know that there are other people being accountable too. And so it becomes a little different, right? So accountability is one thing that I definitely noticed. Great question on how do you know it's not like your ego or your trauma response versus your intuition. For me, it's very clear because when I hear something, it comes out of nowhere. It is not because I'm thinking. It's not because I'm, trying to figure something out and giving something a solution to. It is, I'll be driving down minding my own business. And all of a sudden, something will come to me, a vision will come to me, something very clear will come to me. And that's how I know that it's my intuition. I can foresee things now. The clearer you are, the more of a clear energy, the more you open yourself up and clean the energy around you and become a vessel for love, become a vessel for sanctity, become a vessel for peace.
But I also think that that has to come with the willingness to unpack the social constructs of conditioning or religious conditioning or whatever that might be that is blocking you. And I know for some, like I teach my clients to know your yes and know your no. And that comes because I've said that your body's like the speaker to your soul and it's little impulses. So if you are responding from a triggered state, that is not your intuition.
Right.
That is coming from something else. It's coming from a triggered state, you know,
Correct.
but your intuition is very much it's when the spiritual body, the emotional body, and the physical body has moved and it's aligned and it just goes, you know,
Right.
it
Right.
just
Right.
comes.
Right. You just hear it. You just hear it, and you're open to, like I said, you're open to hear what the universe is speaking to you. You no longer um throw things off as like a coincidence. There are no coincidences. There's only synchronicities.
Right,
Just like when you and I connected to be able to do this interview,
right.
there was no coincidence, it was a synchronicity. And so, because I follow my intuition, I said, okay, let me follow my intuition. When you don't follow your intuition, that's when you have a little bit more of a difficult challenge, because life will speak to you. And if you don't listen the first time, the volume will get higher
Right.
and will get more intense, right? And so, unless you experience that, and a lot of us do, a lot of us experience the intensity without realizing we have been spoken to, right? We have been getting messages. We have been told what to do, or we've gotten feelings, inklings, right? Whatever you want to call it, right? Some people might call it that instead of intuition, and we don't listen. We I'm at fault, right? We don't listen.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, but it also comes from like the spirit world, right? Like I could say, well, is it the trees? Is it the water? Is it the elementals, the earth spirits, the ancestors?
Right.
We can go into all those realms. And I always say there's a certain alignment of repetitive patterns. I say it's within the patterns, you're also going to get the answers, right?
Correct.
And yeah, it's quite fascinating to see how that plays into it. But some of my concerns, like I keep thinking about, like again, going to those women that might be stuck, they might be saying, oh, well, that's so easy for you to speak because I'm stuck in this situation, you know, and I don't have that opportunity to do that because I'm stuck in survival. And can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Um, First, I would urge them to shift the thinking that it's not that they're stuck, but rather what choices are you making to not per- bring forth a change. I definitely made choices, um, and that's hard to swallow. That's very hard to swallow. Um, you then have to be able to accept, right? Forgive and give grace to yourself as to why you made those choices. Because some of them are very real. And it does feel like you're stuck. It does feel like you're not moving. It does feel like someone's putting weight on you.
So
But
how
it
does
doesn't help if we continue to put weight on ourselves.
so how
So,
okay, go ahead. I was gonna say,
okay.
how does that like fit like in a situation where we have systemic issues that are keeping people stuck?
Correct. So I think the first thing is to recognize it, right? Because nothing changes without awareness, right? And so that's why I said you have to be aware that you also have power. Because if we give up all of our power and we truly become a victim, right? And by that I mean our mindset, right? Because our mind is very powerful. And so we have to be careful not to buy into that we are a victim, because we could still be empowered even though we are in a disempowered position.
I think that has a very important distinction, because it doesn't negate the experience of what somebody has or the oppression that somebody is experiencing. It just means that how we view the situation either can keep us stuck or help us find a solution to a better way of being or living.
Absolutely. Right. That's why I'm choosing to use my words carefully, because I don't want anyone to hear and be like, "Oh, you're just re-victimizing me. Like you're putting me back in that position." Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm saying that you are empowered, even though you may be disempowered by others. There is still life that lives within you. There is still fire that breathes within you that you need to recognize, because once you are aware of that, then I think this goes to your next question, right? Once we become aware, so awareness is first. Once we become aware, then we have to begin to say, what is it that I'm really needing to do to empower myself more, to put myself in the position I want to be in, to choose what I want to choose. Not everyone will support you. So I always tell people, you can't tell everyone everything. You need to have sacred spaces, right? So, like, I, for a lot of people, become a sacred space, right? You can talk to me, we can process things, we can look at things, we can see how it's impacting you, we can see how you're still tied to certain belief systems that may not be true, because that is what happens. We are, like you said earlier, we're indoctrinated into believing, women can't handle their life on their own. Women aren't capable of taking care of a house, a family, children, finances. Well, if you've always put
And
us in a position,
I was going to say, and that can also mean that women have to work twice as hard to get that. Women have to perform twice as much, to get that. So this is where both can be true.
exactly. And, right, so I want to add a third component. And when we finally decide, right,
Mhm.
that we are going to choose ourselves, because that's in this equation somewhere, right? We have to choose ourselves first. When I made the decision to live, I wasn't living for my children, although they were benefiting from my being alive. I was choosing myself first, and I had to accept that everyone around me was going to have to deal with. They didn't have to accept it. They were going to have to deal with that maybe you'd be a few minutes late to robotics. Maybe we need to find you a ride to volleyball. Perhaps, I can't drive you to fencing today because I have to be at literally, I had to be at the hospital same time every single day. They only gave you like a few minutes worth of a window to get your medicine. I could not miss that window. That wasn't about them, that was about me. And it spoke about the love that I wanted to pour into me. So the other piece is, while all this is happening, right, and while we need to accept that we need to put ourselves first, we cannot negate the fact that we may really upset some people by doing that, and that they may double or triple down on trying to get us back into a position where they want us to be. And sometimes it doesn't end when a relationship ends, whether that's a family, a relationship, a marriage, whatever it is. It sometimes doesn't end. It sometimes continues to linger because either there's still more going on behind the scenes, even though we're kind of moving along, or things were so bad to begin with, which we were in denial of. So we have to let go of, everything was working fine, because it wasn't, right? We have to give up denial in that transcourse as well. That we have to recognize, you know, our goal for ourselves may not be everyone's goal for us.
Well, it also brings to mind, it's like when an airplane puts on the emergency, put your mask on, you put yours on before even anybody else, because one of the things that I've learned, even doing all the domestic violence work, is we martyr ourselves because we feel like, and I think that's like a systemic pressure. It's like we're not good enough unless pretty much until it's pretty much killing us, right? So it's like we're not a good enough mother, we're not a good enough producer until pretty much we pushed ourselves to the point it's actually taking our life, right? And so, and what I've learned is like, but your kids are witnessing this. So what are we teaching them? And when we teach that, we, mom and dad, are taking care of their vessels because they understand that by taking care of themselves is also taking care of you. And when I take care of myself, then I'm saying I'm in a better position to take care of you, right?
Correct. It's interesting because it's almost also, you have to, because there's a lot of seeding that happens, right? A lot of gaslighting that happens when you get to a point like that. Like, trust me, there's been gaslighting, there's been seeding, there's been, your subconscious mind has been fed stories that you now believe are true. And so your behavior matches what your subconscious mind is telling you, even though maybe your rational conscious mind might be like, this seems a little weird that I'm, doing this. Like, why am I still doing this? Like, this doesn't make sense. But your subconscious mind, because it's already been kind of primed for these things, it thinks it's protecting you. and and that's what its role is. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to protect you,
You're in a protector.
right?
I call you're in a protector.
Right. It's supposed to protect you, even if it's not at the end of the day, right?
Right.
And so the thing that I think becomes beautiful in this process is when you can give yourself self-love, you also give people the opportunity for them to have self-love for themselves as well and set boundaries, even if it's with you. Um, you teach importance of what really matters. Wayne Dyer always talks about, like, giving things away and that you don't really need stuff. And you don't realize that until you're in a position like myself, right? And my son, my oldest, he's now 21, but this was a few years ago. So he might have been maybe 16. And he saw me crying. And I don't know if I was crying because of frustration. I can't remember right now. I don't know if it was because here we go again, right? Like, I thought we were over this wheel. I thought I was off the hamster wheel. And he said to me with a very worried concern, he said, "Are you okay, mommy?" And he said, "You're crying. Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're not sick, are you?" And so I know what he meant. And I said, "No." And then he paused and he said, "We're not sick, are we?" And I said, "No." He said, "My brothers are okay, right? My sister's okay, right?" And I said, "Yes." And then he looked at me with the wisest words you could ever hear from anyone. And he said, "Then we have no problems." He said, "If we're all fine, then we have no problems. So you shouldn't be crying." from a 16-year-old, I think he was, maybe 15. That was amazingly powerful. And he was right. So I was like, okay, you're right. We have no problems, right? As long as we have health and we have love and we are acting in good faith with everyone around us, there are no problems. But we can't see that when we're drowning in this situation, when we're not being taken care of ourselves. When we don't take care of ourselves, we can't think clearly. It's impossible. It's impossible to think clearly because our emotional, it's impossible. Our emotional intelligence does not allow us because and I love to talk about emotional intelligence. I'll just bring it in here for a second so people understand. When our emotions go high, whether it's good emotions or bad emotions, it clouds our thinking. Our thinking goes down. Our judgment goes down. Our insight goes down. When we have downward spiral in those things, there is no way you are able to make appropriate decisions for yourself, let alone anyone else you care for.
That brings me to the next point of what are some of like the daily simple practices that you implemented, in your life to increase your well-being, to basically connect to your true essence, to your intuition, especially during times when life was so overwhelming. Can you start talking about like some of those like daily practices that you implemented to kind of counteract the other stuff that you were experiencing?
Um, the first thing is routine, right? But it has to be a routine rooted in health and wellness. And so I had and still have a very clear routine to my day. So I don't start my day until I've done either self-reiki, meditation, one, the other, both. Sometimes I wake up at 4 in the morning and it's like 6:30 and I'm still not done with my routine, right? Like there's prayer that's involved in here. There's automatic writing, there's connecting with myself in such a peaceful level that I can really hear what I need to hear for the day. Some of the practices that I do use, and be careful when you use this one because I use it with some clients as well, and they're like, I should have known better not to ask while I had a midterm, but it's revealed to me what I need to know.
See, I
And
go, show me what I need to see, help me hear what I need to hear that's not being heard, help me to feel what I'm not able to feel. So I usually go into all those senses when I do it with
right,
people.
right. So I say reveal to me, right? So in whichever capacity, and
Yeah.
if you want to be specific, you can say reveal to me what I need to know about my health, or reveal to me what I need to know about business, reveal to me. But when I just make a blanket, reveal to me what I need to know, you will know. It will come out of nowhere. And that's what, going back to your distinction, how do you know it's your ego or your trauma response versus you're really listening to something that's being given just to you at this moment? So that's one of the things. The other thing was really self-care in terms of nutrition. And I cannot say this enough. We are feeding ourselves, so OURSELVES, we're feeding ourselves rather than feeding our cells, CELLS. Thankfully, I went through this, so maybe none of you have to, right? Like you need to feed your cells. Your cells are your powerhouse of your body. Your cells need your attention. You don't need the pizza, right? You don't need the processed food. And I know that for many, because what you said before, Laura, right? We're so into like, we've got to be perfect. We've got to keep things moving. We've got to do this. We've got to do that, that we opt for that versus what really is needed for us. And so doing that, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah, I used to coach, well, I do coach, still coach my clients. I said, you're either, just think of it this way, you're either putting in your mouth poison or medicine.
Right.
It's not both. It's
Right.
either poison or medicine. So when you pick up something or you drink something, ask yourself, is this medicine or is this poison? And then that,
It's funny you said that
yeah,
because what I would do for myself, right? Because remember, I said I had two goals, feet above ground, and one was to detox my body. And so I'm glad you said that because talk about actionable steps, right?
right.
This is something that you could do. For me, it was whatever was in front of me, I decided to really do plant based, right? And so whatever was in front of me, I would say, is this in line with my commitment? Because it's a commitment at this point, with my commitment to keep my feet above ground. Is this in line with my commitment to detox my body? And so it's very simple. If the answer is yes, if it's in line with it, then full force, you don't have to think about it, go ahead. If the answer is no, then you should not touch it. There is no maybe. like like Yoda, there's no maybe here. There's no trying, there's no maybe. It's either yes, it's in line with my commitment, or no, it's not in line with my commitment. It's not maybe it'll work to be in line with my there's no middle ground.
Yeah, so there is no middle ground. I think that is something that we have to like really, and there is no, like, I keep thinking about, even like with myself, how many times we make excuses, or because, especially like in times I find when we are just exhausted. Like I know, like lately, like just even making dinner lately seems to be a chore because of the weight of the world right now and the weight of what's happening. And by the time dinner comes around, we're so exhausted that we just go, "Ugh," right? And then you have to really self-evaluate. Does it still justify, maybe cutting corners, right? To put those toxins in. And is that why we feel exhausted or amplifying that exhaustion to begin with? Right. So like these are all the things I know, like I always ask myself, but that's all the self inquiry. That's part of the awareness piece. That's part of building the relationship with the mind, with the body, with the spirit, understanding that each of these bodies are independent of each other with their intelligence, yet also
Mhm.
interdependent with their intelligence, right?
Right.
So that brings me to like the name of your business that speaks to the I am. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I, I like a lot of symbolism in my life, and my name is actually, even though I'm Hispanic, it has Greek origins. And I always say, people always ask me, oh, what does it mean? I'm like, well, it's Greek and it means, gentle breeze. And then I follow by, there's really nothing gentle about my breeze, but like, that's my name. And so, in the process of really like sitting down earlier this spring and being like, okay, what is it that I'm really wanting for others, right? Like I want to be able to share, all of the practices. So I also do sound healing, I do meditation, I do hertz music, I do a lot of stuff, Laura, right? But I started to look and I was like, what can I use that would really be strong? And I can't remember what I looked at, but I know it was intuition because I just picked up my phone and started to look at stuff. And then um, Emmy came out, and I was like, that's interesting. And it meant I am. And so I was like, I really love that because every time someone says, "Oh, Emmy Wellness," right? They're making the affirmation, "I am wellness." And so that's really what we have to do. We have to continue to live and breathe our affirmations. And they have to be positive affirmations because, again, our subconscious will begin to believe what we tell it we are. And if I'm constantly saying, Emmy Wellness, Emmy Wellness, Emmy Wellness, I am wellness, you know?
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, that doesn't negate shadow work, by the way, for those of you who are
Correct.
listening, because shadow work's a whole nother thing. And I always say, like, in the shadows is actually where we find our power. It's not
Correct.
in the light, but it is the balance. Like, if you're constantly saying, I can't take this, I can't take this, I can't take this, I
Right.
can't take this, guess what? You can't take this, right?
Correct.
But if you say, I am healed, whole, and well, and you keep saying I'm healed, whole, and well, the body will eventually start responding, right? And that brings me to the other aspects of, like, October 1 being breast cancer awareness month. And we talked about, like, the importance of, like, why it's important to listen to our body, early detection, self advocacy in the healthcare industry, because there still is a lot of bias in the healthcare industry,
Right.
sadly. And I feel like we've gone backwards more than forwards in some aspects. And then it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? The importance of creating safe spaces, support systems, and not losing oneself in the cycles of harm, right? Maintaining that I'm still worthy, I'm still deserving, I'm still loving, even though you might be going through harm and experiencing harm or experiencing harmful systems, right? So my question to you is, like, how do you see these, like, so-called awareness movements, right? Connecting in terms of, like, women reclaiming their voice, their agency, their essence.
It's interesting because a lot of these movements, right, or how they're marketed is marketing. And so they're trying to foreshadow like what it is that a woman is thinking or feeling or experiencing. And sometimes they're on it, right? Sometimes I think it's a little bit of a miss. Um, and so it may not be really resonating with all types of women, right? It may not be resonating with the older women or, our elders, right? Or it may not be resonating with the younger people who haven't had those experiences yet or don't believe in those experiences yet. And so I think it's a fine balance to be able to, I love your word discernment. It's been my word for the year. So I think it's been the word for the year for everyone, at least from my perspective. How do you discern what you're hearing and how it applies to you, right? Because this isn't about selling positivity, right? This is about looking at wholeness and looking at wellness from that perspective, right? And if we can begin to understand, like you said, we weave, right? That everything is interconnected, right? Like the fact that we may have people that are bullying us, right? That may be intimidating us, that may be causing us fear or being in the process of fear or our own shadows, right? I love the fact that you said shadows because as a psychologist, you know um I don't normally use the word shadows when I'm working with someone, but that's what we're doing. We're unpacking real dark stuff, right? We're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to bring it to the light. We're trying to transmute it, right? So there's some transmutation. So you can't ignore the shadows because we're not always sitting in light. However, I believe that a lot of people aren't realizing that there's this interconnected dimension with wellness and wholeness and abuse, even if it's psychological abuse, even if it's verbal abuse, even if it's a toxic workplace or toxicity, right? That is abuse. People are not understanding that is not creating wellness for ourselves. And while we can try to justify, or some people choose to justify, well, I have to stay there because I have to feed my family. Yes, you do have to feed your family, but at what cost? I tell people all the time, wellness, you're either going to, and this is how I get people to really understand. I'm like, you're going to pay for wellness, whether you do it up front or you do it at the end. You're going to have to pay for wellness in some perspective. At some point you're going to have to pay for it, and I don't just mean financially. I mean, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to make really hard decisions. You're going to have to make really hard choices. Who is the energy that you're around? Who are the people that you're um allowing yourself, choosing to speak to you and feed you? So it's not just about feeding medicine, physically. It's also, are you feeding medicine in the way that you're supposed to, all the way around?
Yeah, that kind of goes to also understanding like breast cancer, for instance, isn't just physical. And I think that's the challenge is I think 100% of the folks I've worked with that have had breast cancer also have been either a survivor of sexual assault, domestic, some form of domestic violence, whether it's child abuse in the home or domestic violence. So, and I find it interesting too that they're both on the same month. So, you cannot negate one without the other. And it's understanding the whole and the systems. I think that's the one thing when it comes to wellness is we cannot, and I've always said this, we cannot fully heal unless all people are free, unless all people are liberated and systems of oppression have been addressed. Because what affects me affects the circle, and what affects the circle affects me. And I think that is what we have to also understand is like that's the interconnected web is like it's not one or the other. It's understanding the weaving of it all, you know?
It's interesting because that was the comment that went through my head, and then I kind of veered and I paused to give you space. But exactly, you and I have spoken before, and I think I shared with you that after all of this happened to me and I was trying to clean up, right? Or gain control, whichever way you want to look at it, right? Like I was choosing to really be empowered in decisions that I had made in the past that were not really healthy for me at this point. Every woman that I would say, can you help me? I need to figure this out. And I would explain, like, you're going to have to talk a little slower to me because on chemo, I've had breast cancer. Their response was, oh, so did I. When I filed my paperwork for divorce, all of a sudden I found out I had breast cancer. And it wasn't one person, it was a multitude of people that, after leaving a very toxic situation, whether it was a marriage, whether it was work, whether it was, their own families, their body had grown this disease, right? Dis-ease inside. And it's almost as if your body is trying to balance what you're experiencing. And I can tell you that's not the way you want to balance things, ladies, right? That's not the way you want to balance things, because it is to get to the point of where I was. It was stage 3 cancer, 3 tumors, 2 different types of cancer, and I always say, and 1 opportunity to survive.
Yeah. And I also want to just add that it's not just breast cancer that I saw as a link to abuse. It was anything uterine. So like,
Right.
endometriosis and a bunch of other things I've also have witnessed because again, those are the parts, the reproductive parts, that parts that define us as female that have been attacked
Right.
that have been
Right.
attacked. And so whether or not like our way when we are at that survival stage, it was, I always think of like, well, how did I filter? Did I like put it in various places because I needed one body to function because of survival. And then now we just peel back the layers of saying, okay, how do we now bring back the whole? And I think that's the other thing when we talk about wholeness. It's not just like, what does that really mean? Wholeness is really, in my mind, it's making sure the mental body, the spiritual body, the physical body are all whole, not just the physical body. Like sometimes we talk about wholeness, we think about
Hmm.
just the physical body, but it's really understanding, like when we hear mind, body, spirit, and I say to my clients, do you really know what that means?
Right.
Do you really understand what that means? Like we always say, or like even like when they say, well, I'm very depressed or I'm very sad, I'm like, that's a label. Tell me how you feel.
Right.
Like, and I go, because if you get stuck in the label, that's getting stuck in the head. And then we wonder why we have even throat issues and we have disconnection issues because we just pop labels and then we really don't understand how we feel. And then how does that feel in the physical body? How does that feel in the mental body? How does that feel in the spiritual body? And that goes to all those things about discernment, intuition, right? And really tapping into that wisdom that our spirit, our soul is really trying to lead us, right? Can you share like what you found to be some of the most beneficial tools to help you in those crucial stages? I know you mentioned like Reiki and meditation and journaling, but if somebody who's in crisis, say for instance, right now, whether because of like what recently happened this week, or because of women's rights, or maybe they are in an abusive situation, right? Or maybe they're fighting, well, if it's not breast cancer, they're fighting something else. What would be some of the things that folks can do today to maybe bring more of that wholeness into their lives?
Mm. When I hear that, my first thought is, okay, how can we get something that's quick, free, and into your hands, right? Where you don't have to pay, because a lot of people will say, well, we can't afford, and that's a reality. So I'm not right. We can't afford that. So one of the things that I would look for is Hertz music, which could really help regulate the body. Breathing is free, uh, and it really does help to regulate the body. Being able to give yourself space and time outside of a location that is already reinforcing the negative, I'd remove myself. If you have a place of peace that you find, I love water, I love trees, I love nature. Sometimes it's just going out there and just kind of staying in there and breathing. Finding a support system. There are a lot of support systems that do offer for free. If you are already in a medical system, ask to speak to the social worker, right? That's also free, right? You can get the social worker that can connect you with other services. If you're afraid of something that's happening in your home, go to a trusted source and a sacred source. That is really all that you can do, that that you are empowered to do. If you're not sure who your sacred source is, um, what I would suggest is who is around you that is able to listen without judgment.
We call it like holding space, right?
Right. I'm trying to explain it in a way where someone, if they're having a little difficulty, like, being like, because you're overwhelmed, right? And again, you can't think. You're like, oh, I don't have anybody. I don't have, well, someone that you know, that you've seen, that you've observed. Maybe they're not close to you, but you've observed them and they offer no judgment to people. Reach out to them and say, can you give me a listening ear? Because sometimes we don't want people to give us solutions because we're too overwhelmed already. What we just need is to really let that out. Journaling is another good way, but I'm very particular in how I tell people to journal, because this isn't about dumping negative stuff in and then rereading it, because that's contraindicated. Um, there's things that you could also do in terms of if you're stuck right now. I think grounding, right? So some grounding things like going back to you, and you said you have a free Patreon. Again, I wouldn't use sources that I haven't cleared. That's just my personal opinion. I'm very particular to who I listen to, because not everyone has the same light, and haven't worked on their shadows. So I'm very particular to whom I rely on. So I have a trusted source. I get that asked all the time. Dr. Gonzalez, you heal people all the time. Who do you go for healing? Well, I have my trusted sources. And what I just shared with everyone is how I pick my trusted sources. Those individuals that don't judge, those individuals that I know have my best interest at hand, and that comes from having made observations with them.
And I think that also means, for me, um, they have to have at least 20 years experience. I hate to say it, but it's true. They weren't an overnight like guru
Yeah,
because of the
right.
pandemic. They also like, because I know how I pick my trusted sources, and I have a handful. So, like, if I'm having a challenging time, for instance, I will sink in and I will say, okay, here are these people here, and which one would be the best one to reel in right now for what
Right,
I'm experiencing, right?
right,
And then I would know. But they're all experienced, and the other bridge I will also add, because I see this as a problem in a lot of white spiritual spaces and a white healing spaces, is that, especially with recent issues that have been happening in our culture societally in the US, is there's a lot of white supremacy, and very toxic ideologies in white healing spaces. So I do not go to those people, and I will not refer people to those people, because if you cannot see liberation for all people, then that's a problem, and that's an elitist, very problematic situation, and I just have to name that, because to me, that's a safety issue. They would not I would not feel that those people would be safe. They would be trying to heal me or work with me from a very filtered lens of white supremacy.
It's interesting that you said that, because one of the other things that is and it's gotten more heightened for me with a question mark, is
Mhm.
really, how much are you charging for my healing? Right? Like, if you're telling me, you can heal me in 8 hours, I'm, I put a little bit of a question mark on that, because are you, like, what are we healing, right? Like, healing is really a journey. Maybe we can tackle one problem, right, and find some solutions to that one problem, but I want people to understand that healing is really a journey and a process. And the way I'm speaking today is even more advanced than you would have caught me maybe 5 years ago. Although 5 years ago, like, I had to learn quick. Learning curve was real quick, real quick in my instance. And so yes, right. Like, you cannot be in a space in psychology. My teachers had always said to me, and I believe this with all aspects of healing, right? But they said, you cannot take someone where you have not been willing to go. So I think that's a good way to pick your healer. If your healer
Yes.
has not been able, or hasn't never experienced where you have been or close to it, or has healed other people, right? For That's where the 20 years comes in, like in my case 25, right? That you've seen quite a bit. um, if you can't have that, then you should not be going to a person who has not been able to take themselves to where you want to go.
I also have a pet peeve with people that are in the spiritual or healing spaces that claim to be trauma experts, but one, do not give anything back to the community, do not volunteer in any of those trauma spaces. Um, it's very problematic that I see this on a regular basis. I just saw it yesterday where, one person's been preaching that they are a trauma expert and they're a healer, and yet they are endorsing somebody who thinks that, I'm not going to try to be very careful how I phrase this, but like, very toxic, harmful systems they're supporting. And then I go, okay, so you're treating people for money, claiming to be a trauma expert, and you're supporting systems that perpetuate harm to people, and then you're turning away from and profiting from that. And then you're going to go and coach people and tell people that you're going to fix them so you can get them more money from them. So be very careful from folks, be very mindful if they're supporting very harmful ideologies, as well as pulling the neutrality aspect, because neutrality also begets more oppression. So it really needs to be the stance of no harm, like as you said, first do no harm.
Right.
That's different than neutrality. And I'm not a big, hey, give me $3,000 and in 8 weeks I'm going to fix your problem. That is a red flag to run as far as possible, because I've always said that healing is a process, not a destination.
Right.
And so it is not, hey, I'm going to be fixed in 8 weeks. If anybody is promoting that type of stuff, that is like so wrong.
Right.
So wrong and so predatory. Let's just call it, let's just name it for what it is. It's predatory. They are preying on your wounds to profit. They're not
And
there to fix you, to help you, or to heal you.
and then we go back to the fact that, when we're in those states, we don't think clearly,
Right.
right? And that's not meant to be an insult to anybody, right? Because, I'm the first one, I diss myself. I'm the first one. I'm like, if your IQ goes down normally 15 points temporarily when you're under such pressure, I'm like, mine goes 30, right? Like mine goes way down, right? Like, so this isn't about, judging somebody. It's so that people can understand, right? Like, when you're in this situation, that is not the time to make critical decisions, right? That is
It's not.
not the time to make those critical decisions. And
We've all been there because we're all human. So it doesn't
correct.
matter. This isn't like I'm better than you or you're better than me. This is really a human issue. This is part of our built-in survival mechanisms. And when we're in those places, right, that not being able to think clearly, it's
Right.
really to force us, because our nervous system, I always see, I like analogies, that's the way my brain operates. I always say it's like my finger stuck in an electrical socket. So if my finger's stuck in an electrical socket, go, then
Mm,
how am I, for those who are just listening, how am
mm,
I supposed to think clearly? We have to first unplug. So that's
right.
like, so that's where, like, if I can give you any tips for those who are listening, and you can listen to prior episodes where I talk about this, it is when you stop, pause, breathe, and then create that space to know what is the action step.
Right. Well, that's why I said, right? Like Hertz music, right? Like you have to know what to do. So going back to, what I stated before, it's really knowing when you're in a good state,
Yeah.
you plan it, right? You know what you're going to do. so that when you're not in a good state, it becomes automatic. And if you have to put it like on your phone, one, play this music, two, call this person, three, there's nothing wrong with that because again, you're not thinking. So it gives you that automatic direction of what to do. What I normally do, like when I stopped that when I heard, today your journey begins, I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does
Right.
that mean? And I had to kind of like center myself, right? And centering for me is really like bringing back breath and bringing back, the ability to think. And at that point, I was like, okay, who can I call? Who can I trust? And I only, aside from my brother and sister-in-law, who were the one of the first to know, I brought in four people outside of my family. That was it. I told my staff because I'm very consistent and they would probably figure out like, oh, she's gone for a while and wonder what happened to me. So I told
Right.
them, and after I told them, I made the decision. I'm not telling anybody else because the negative emotions that were brought out by them was just I I knew I didn't need that. I knew I needed good energy, positive energy, as good as they were trying to be. I know they were hurt, but I needed something clear. So if right, speaking to the people listening, if you know ahead of time what to do, then that makes it so much easier. You're using stop, breathe, and then take action, right? um Stopping and knowing where to go, like forward, right? I know which button to push. I may not know everything, but I know which button to push. I think speaks volumes.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And, I don't foresee things just in general collectively getting easier. Right. So this is where our healing, your healing, right? And your well-being, our well-being are our birthright, right? And reclaiming ourself, reclaiming yourself is really the most powerful medicine that we can give ourselves. It is a radical self-acceptance because really and truly, if you really look at it, again, we talk about systems, for a very long time, probably hundreds of years, we have been indoctrinated, especially women, that self-care is selfish. So, it's really important that taking care of our minds, taking care of our bodies, taking care of our spirits
Mm-hmm.
is really a form of radical acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So anchoring back to like spiritual medicine, right? Healing happens, right? When we can face hard truths, when we can face the triggers, when we can reclaim the essence, when we can embody the truth, and we can really know how to discern using the art of discernment, right? Of what is real, what is not, but really harnessing, knowing what that intuitive voice looks like and really listening to the body, as you have said, right? Any final words that you would be able to offer our listeners at this time?
Well, I just want to piggyback off that,
Yeah,
and going back to a comment we talked about earlier, right?
sure.
About Emmy Wellness, right? I am. Um, you can do wellness and still work on parts of healing, right?
Right.
It's not one or the other. It's not I'm well and there's nothing wrong, or I'm all wrong and there's nothing well. It's you can be well. It's like a seesaw, a nice balance. And sometimes, we tip a little bit, and sometimes, we want to find that balance. So for those in a position where maybe you're feeling that you are not living the life that you had hoped for or dreamed of at one point, there there is definitely hope, and I know that the hope lives within you. You are the hope. You are your own catalyst. You are the person who is going to get you from point A to point B, even if you choose to use a guide, right? Like Laura or people that have used me, right? You are the strength. I need people to understand that you can get through anything if you choose to do that. And there are people out here who can support you. So I want them to
And
understand how valuable they are.
I think it goes to that our bodies, our being, our mental body, our spirit body, our physical body, at the end of the day, this isn't like when we wake up, it's because like there's an instinct of survival and living. That is our innate being, right? And so we're either amplifying that or we're squashing that, right? And so it's knowing how to tune into that frequency, and understanding the language, the thoughts, all of these things that amplify that either, and even the food, right? It's either medicine or it's poison, right? So it's all these things. And I get it that for some who might be listening, but in my neighborhood, we don't have access to that. And I'm not diminishing that as well. I get that. I understand that. And at the same time, it's how do we do the best we can when we're in those situations, and the mentals can be a huge point of who survives and who doesn't in those situations. We hear this all the time, like in war-torn countries, right? It's the mentals that actually
Right,
helped people survive in those situations. So,
right.
um, how would folks be able to find you?
Generally through my LinkedIn or Instagram accounts. I'm in the process of creating a website. I've actually done business all these 20 something years just by word of mouth, which is a blessing. So yeah, you can find me on my LinkedIn under Dr. Isaura Gonzalez and Instagram as well, Dr. Isaura Gonzalez.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you can also find me at www.laurahealingwithspirit.com. And if you liked this episode, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, make sure you give us feedback. Become a Patreon member. Again, memberships start for free. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, all those good things. It helps us to grow. It helps us to really get our messages and the idea and concept that we have triggers. It's how we deal with them, how we turn them into a power, and how we utilize what I feel is the one medicine we don't utilize enough of is spiritual medicine. So thank you for tuning into the latest episode of Triggers and Spiritual Medicine. And until next time, have a great day and be sure to be kind to others.